decision to move forward into a new mindset, into a new skill. Let's get through hardships and challenges in a more empowering way, in a way that sets us up for success. Does the future you need you to focus on here today?
So let's get started. So Alison coaches. Alison and I have been connected for a little while now. We first met on one of the networking sessions through obviously the whole COVID situation. And what I really like about Alison is she actually lives over in South Africa near Durban, where there's lots of good surf. So it stood out for me straight away. So a little bit of a connection there. But Alison calls herself an emotional intelligence consultant. And the one thing I remember from the 90s, and it might be different to what you're going to explain today, but I remember my favourite saying in the 90s was control your emotions and ordain your destiny. So this whole emotional intelligence is a word that I really relate to. But to be honest with you, Alison, I've got no idea how to explain it in the way you're probably going to explain it today. So I'm really looking forward to this session because it was one of those words that it just meant so much to me through the 90s. And you know what? It still does to this day. So once again, it was control your emotions and ordain your destiny. So tell us a little bit about, you got I'm not sure if I pronounce it Revo Consulting, but maybe tell us a bit more about your consulting before we start your session.
Thanks, Scotty. It's really great to be here. And yes, we connected through the Mojo sessions around about this time last year, thanks to COVID. And I always say to people that my biggest blessing that came out of 2020 was just all of the connections that I made around the world. And even in Durban, just by reaching out, connecting, attending sessions like this, you never know who you're going to meet. So that for me was the biggest blessing out of 2020. And so Revo was officially launched. I feel like the day I got my website was the day that the business was real. Before then I was just kind of playing around in the playpen, but my website made me official. And it's not the best day to launch it, but I'm a sentimental old fool. So I launched it on my mom's birthday, which was the 23rd of December. I felt like that was a good omen for, even though, it's Christmas time. And Revo is a play on the words revolution. It's the first 4 letters of revolution, R-E-V-O. And as I was explaining my story to my web designer, I just, with my marker pen, and I drew a line, not really intending for it to go anywhere, because for me, when we are involved in change, when we can make a decision to move forward into a new mindset, into a new skill, to do something different, we make that decision, we've drawn a line in the sand. So when you look at my branding, there is a line between the R-E and the V-O, which is really great because re is a prefix for so many things: reimagine, reevaluate, realize, revolution, all of these words that we can use to think about. And I say, when we can rethink our challenges, we reveal our potential.
Beautiful.
So I talk a lot about mindset, and the geeky, very rabbit hole world of neuroscience has me captured and held prisoner a lot because I go down very deep, dark research holes. I'm super interested in it. I have a background in psychology myself, but I spent 25 years as a management consultant and as a project manager. So I've kind of done a full circle and come back to my first love, which is really people and change, and supporting people in corporates mainly. That's my focus. I qualified as an occupational or organizational psychologist, supporting people in organizations and especially leaders in helping not only them, but helping them to support their teams through a change process. So I'm really passionate about, and so Revo felt like a good way for me to express that in a business name. And Alison Coaching is just too many C's.
I'm not sure if you know from the background, but the company I started in 2002 is called ReNet, R-E-N-E-T. So I love the RE words. I ended up surrounding myself with RE words all the time because obviously it fitted in with re-net, so totally get it, totally on your page. Well, I didn't have a line.
Wait until you see some of my branding and the presentation, Scotty. You're going to love it.
All right. Well, look, let's get started. You got 20 odd minutes, and then we'll sort of break into Q&A. So I'll let you take over now. So let's start your presentation.
Fabulous. All right. So let's get started. What do you think of that, Scotty? My front page.
Lots of RE words. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So today's talk is really all about overcoming hardship and challenges. And, we've spoken so much about this in the last 12 months, given where we've been globally as a community of people around the globe. And maybe today just is a different way of thinking about some ways to overcome hardship and challenges, thinking about it from an emotional intelligence perspective. So everything I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm going to be sharing tools and tips around emotional intelligence. I haven't gone deep into the science behind how the brain works, but we can probably cover that a little bit in the Q&A as well, because I wanted to give you more about the practical ways that we can look at hardship and challenges to help us move through them and get to the other side, because that's where the secrets, that's where your biggest wins are going to be, is when you can get to the other side. So there's 3 things that I want to cover with you today. So I'm going to be talking about how we can use these 3 habits to overcome hardship and challenges with less stress and uncertainty. Because whenever we work through a tough time, whenever we go through adversity, we always say, I'm so stressed, I don't know what to do. These question marks hang in the air. So some of these habits, these 3 habits, are going to help you to do that with less stress and uncertainty. And as leaders, and as people who not only lead maybe your own business and your own teams, but let's not forget, we are also all leaders of our own life, of our own destiny. Let's get through hardships and challenges in a more empowering way, in a way that sets us up for success, but not only ourselves, but for everyone else that we come into contact with as a result of this hardship or challenge that we're working through. And then finally, confidence, the confidence to face the challenge and the ability to influence other people on the journey as we go through that journey. The key skill we're going to be talking about here today, and if we can think about this as an umbrella skill, and I know it's a bit of a buzzword from 2020, but bear with me, is resilience. So I'm going to give you a spin on resilience today that I hope is unique in some ways, and I hope will really just encourage a bit of debate towards the end of the session. But before we get into the real nuts and bolts of the presentation, I want you just to take a minute of time, and I really want you to think about the context that we are in. Because whenever we go through anything, be it personal or in our organizations, in our teams, in our families, no matter where it is, we are going through that change, that adversity, that hardship in a system. So in your own business, or even if you're thinking about it from a family perspective, maybe you've got something in mind that you are struggling with today or over the last couple of weeks. Who is it that you are supporting? So what team or what family member are you supporting? And who are they supporting? And then if we think about it even broader than that, we start to think about the teams that are supporting your teams, the suppliers, the consultants, the contractors, the people in the community who are supporting the suppliers, the consultants, the contractors, the state that you live in, or in South Africa, we say the province, the city, the continent, the globe. Everything that happens to us happens in in a system. We're never on our own. There's always other elements that are impacting us, affecting us, and that we can impact and affect in the same way. So because of this, and if you've got a pen and paper, you can write this down. Otherwise, keep these two questions in mind. And they're great questions to ask during a challenge or uncertainty. What do they need me to learn here today? The people, the teams, the communities in your system, what do they need you to learn here today? And the second most powerful question we can ask, especially during times of uncertainty, what does the future you need you to focus on here today? So the answers to these questions might not be apparent for you right now, but I bring them up at the beginning of the session because I just want to plant the seed that we are asking ourselves empowering questions for either a known uncertainty, in other words, an adversity or a hardship that you've got in mind, or something that we can just remember next time we face a challenge. Okay. And today, what I'm going to be sharing with you through the session is all around the skills of resilience. Now, resilience is so much more common than any of you would ever think, because we seem to think of it as this magical superpower that only a few people have. But I put it to you that we all learn resilience from a little age. We all learned how to walk. It took huge resilience to get off our knees and start walking, and for Scotty to go from walking to surfing. Not so. It took huge resilience for all of us to get behind the wheel of a car for the first time and pass our driver's ed or our driver's license, whatever you call it, wherever you're from. It takes huge resilience to go for that first job interview, to pitch up at university on the first day, not really having any idea what's going to happen, or whether the first day that you open the doors to your new organization, to your business. We all develop resilience and we all have resilience. What I do with my clients is I teach them how to boost that resilience muscle, how to practice the skill of resilience each and every day. And I have 3 habits I'm going to share with you. But in order to understand what something is, we often have to understand what it is not. And for me, resilience is not bouncing back. You hear so many people say resilience is the ability to bounce back. But I would say to you, why would you want to bounce back? Because bouncing back takes you to the status quo, which is where the problem started in the first place. What we want to do is put our foot on the accelerator and move beyond. Yes, we might have to bounce somewhere, but let's not stay in the status quo. Resilience is also not enduring the challenge. That's called perseverance. Some people might even call it being a little bit stubborn. Because when we understand what resilience really is, when we start to understand the science behind it, resilience is about learning. It's about learning a new way so that we can move beyond the status quo. We can't deal with today's problems using yesterday's thinking. We have to understand that we need to move forward. And lastly, resilience is not avoiding the challenge or being distracted by the next little shiny thing. How often do we do that? So resilience is absolutely about moving through your challenge and importantly into a new mindset. When we understand how the science of emotions works and we understand that our brain is either triggering us into a reward state or a risk state, in other words, a rest and digest, we were looking after the parasympathetic nervous system, we're calm, we're able to think clearly, creatively, versus that risk state, that fight and flight, where we are distracted, our energy feels high, we're not able to think clearly, we often react rather than respond. When we understand these two aspects of how the brain works, we can start to move into a calmer space, a space that allows us to think more clearly. In other words, we move into a new mindset that supports us through the challenge. Resilience is about adapting. We've got to be, to use a word that's also a buzzword at the moment, we've got to be a little bit agile, got to think on our feet. It's about bouncing somewhere, wherever that might be, a holding pattern so that we can learn a new skill, create a new process, a new methodology, and move forward. And lastly, importantly, it's about letting go and about learning. And when I say letting go, what I mean by letting go is letting go of those strong, unproductive emotions that hold us in the status quo, like disappointment, criticism, judgment, unhappiness, stress, and start to notice where these strong and unproductive emotions are holding us back. We have to notice, let go, and adjust in order to move into that new mindset. So the 3 habits, and there are everyday habits. There's nothing, there's very few new ideas in the world. I've just packaged this in an Alison Coates way with my understanding of emotional intelligence and of business. So I really am looking forward to the discussion at the end. The first habit I want to talk to you about is discipline. Because I really believe that what resilient people do is not special. Like I said, we all have resilience. We've all practiced resilience at some stage in our lives. We just need to understand how to boost it, leverage it. We've already got that competence. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at discipline. You might be thinking, why discipline? Well, it's because what resilient people are prepared to do is make the time and the energy available to, first of all, start the habits that we need to practice and then practice them. For those of you involved in any sport, or maybe your kids have got a sport that they play, or perhaps a family member, when you first start something, you're a little bit clunky and it doesn't really feel natural or right. Imagine brushing, if you're right-handed, imagine brushing your teeth with your left hand. It's going to feel really icky to begin with. But with discipline and practice, it starts to become second nature. So the ways that we can develop resilience by practicing discipline, and the first one is that wonderful habit of letting go. And we can let go when we stand in acceptance. And when I say acceptance, when we're undergoing a challenging time of hardship and adversity, whatever it might be, we're struggling with something, we've got a problem that we've been mulling around in our head. Don't be attached to any of the negative or unproductive emotions around that problem. Really practice acceptance that this is where you are currently. Be in the moment. Savor the moment and almost get excited about it, because when we can do that, we know that we're about to learn something. So we have to accept where we are, and not in criticism or judgment, because all that does is they are distractions. That's that little magpie, that little shiny thing that's distracting you from your journey through the challenge. The godfather or the grandfather, whatever you want to call him, of psychology, Freud, said a very long time ago that all great advances of mankind start within. And that's where we start any journey. We have to become and practice self-awareness. Awareness of self, awareness of others, and awareness of the wider world are our three key competencies in any emotional intelligence model. When you lack awareness of self, you can often be rudderless. Lack awareness of others, you can be clueless. And when we lack awareness of the wider world, that system that I spoke about, we're often blindsided by things that happen to us left field. So spending some time in self-awareness. What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? How do I feel today? What emotions are coming up for me as Alison is taking us through this presentation? What other things are distracting me from this presentation? That's all practicing awareness. Thirdly, practice discipline. Choose one thing that you will practice for the rest of this week where you know you can practice discipline. Maybe you've been meaning to hit the tar and go for your 5K run and you just haven't done it for a few weeks. Maybe it's reading every night for half an hour, spending an hour with your kids, doing some gardening, whatever that thing is. Set yourself a challenge for this week and practice being disciplined about it. Maybe it's as simple as drinking your 8 glasses of water. Every time we commit to doing something of that nature and we practice it, we are practicing the art of discipline. And when we do it with the easy stuff, it helps us be ready for the difficult stuff. Plan it. For those of you with businesses, we all do, and I'm hoping to see some hands up, risk assessments. We all think about what are the risks of doing this. Me as a project manager, I spent most of my day in risk meetings. Why then do we not do it for ourselves? What are your if-then scenarios? So if my challenge is X, what are the things that are going to risk me being successful in this process? What are my if-then scenarios? Because bringing awareness, that wonderful habits, into our discipline helps us get through the challenge, because we don't have to get stressed when that event occurs, because we know what we're going to do, because we've already planned it. And influence. What can you control? What can't you control? Don't spend your precious energy and time in the can't control space. On a piece of paper, I'm a great one for lists. If you could see my office, I've got static whiteboards all over the wall with spider diagrams, all things. My brain, I need to get information out of my brain on a piece of paper. Draw a line down the middle with my challenge. What can I control? What can't I control? Those things that you can't control, don't expend your precious energy on them, because when we're dealing with a challenge, we need all of our physical and our mental energy to be able to stay in our lane and not be distracted. This is all the art of discipline. The second habit, one of my favorite habits, is empathy. And you might say, oh, empathy comes easy to you, Al, because you're a woman. It's a very soft, feminine quality. But I argue with you that we are all biologically wired for empathy. As babies, we recognize the sound of a human voice over and above any other sound. We recognize the shape of a human face over and above any other shape. We are biologically wired to connect and recognize humans. So empathy is something that, and you can go and research this. Just Google mirror neurons and empathy, and you will understand that we are all wired to naturally be empathetic towards each other. I think we've just forgotten how. So here's some ways that I'm going to remind you how you can do that. When we are in a state of overwhelm, anxiety, uncertainty, or stress, whatever that might be, choose your word. I'm just listing a whole list of labels here. The best thing we can do is think less of self and more of others. When we step into a role model mindset, something happens in our brain around our thinking, where we start to automatically think more compassionately and think more empathetically. And what that does, when we're stressed, the cortisol is going crazy in the brain. When we move into empathy and compassion and calm and kindness, dopamine, oxytocin, and opioids start to be spiked, and we start to see the balance. We start to see the cortisol being lowered. But the most important thing is when cortisol is high over time, it actually switches off the thinking brain. The cortisol will override the hormones that we need for creating memories and for thinking. Because when we're under stress, the body thinks it's being attacked by a ragged-toothed dinosaur, and your brain is telling you to put on your trainers and run as fast as you can. So we need to find ways to take care of that spike of cortisol by activating calm, compassion, and empathy so that we can think more creatively, we can think more expansively, which is what we need when we are dealing with a problem. Listening. We have two of these and one of these, so we should always be listening twice more than speaking. But if you have to speak, I encourage you to ask more questions and make fewer statements. This is how we develop empathy for other people, a genuine, authentic curiosity in how they are or in understanding their view of the world. Because what this does for us is it helps us to develop a new way of thinking, a new mindset, a new perspective on the status quo. And that's what we need to move through hardships and problems. When we can move into our stretch zone, when we can get out of that comfort zone, we get to practice humility. And when we are being humble, again, it activates those wonderful, it activates self-compassion, and it activates the ability to be more curious, which supports us in being empathetic towards self and others. Seek feedback, and especially on your communication skills. When we're dealing with empathy, we're dealing with building rapport and creating a bridge between yourself and another person so that you can discover this new way of thinking, this new perspective on your problem. But if your communication skills are lacking, that building rapport is going to be very difficult. So listening, asking more questions, and asking for feedback on communication. Did I explain myself accurately, or did you understand what I meant? How could I have asked that question in a more powerful way? And lastly, there are 10 ways, psychologically, there are 10 cognitive bias that we all fall prey to from time to time. Black and white thinking, it's either yes or no, over-exaggerating, judgmental. So there's 10 different cognitive bias. And if anybody would like a summary of those 10, I'll happily send it, or maybe I can just add it into the system. I've got it on a PDF. Really, really important to remember that, because when we come with our bias, a yes or no thinking, we're not open to discovering a new way. We're not open to listening out for the answers that are coming from the people that we're questioning. And then the third habit is vulnerability. So discipline, empathy, and now vulnerability for resilience. How does vulnerability actually impact resilience? Well, for me, this is really the soft side of resilience. Vulnerability takes huge courage. Vulnerability takes huge confidence. And vulnerability means that we have to stand authentically in who we are. And authenticity is another one of our primary emotional intelligence competencies. So in order to be vulnerable, we need to be willing to be authentic. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How am I going to get from good to great? These are some of the questions we must ask ourselves. And we need to be disciplined about the learning activities we might need to go through in order to leverage a strength or to minimize a blind spot. Here again, feedback comes back into the picture, but this is different to the feedback and empathy, because when we are vulnerable, we are happy and confident to say, I didn't get it right, I need some help, or I'm not quite sure how to go about this. Scotty, could you please give me some advice? Which is how Scotty and I actually met the first time, because I wanted to know how he did his videos. And that's the reason why I've got one of my own little mics now, was because Scotty suggested to me to get rid of the mic on the computer and get myself a lapel mic. And what a difference it's made to me showing up online. I feel so much more confident not being plugged in all the time. Thank you, Scotty, for that. The 3 R's of vulnerability. Reflect. How well did I do? What did I do? What did I do that was really good? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? And what can I continue to do? Because I know they're going to help me get through this challenge. Relate. Relate to other people. That ability to connect to another person, to put your hand up and say, I didn't get it right. I need some help. Again, creates that wonderful bridge of compassion. And when we can be compassionate towards self, we are able to also then practice compassion towards others. And that helps us to build relationships and rapport. And then reframe. We aren't going to always get it right. Change is never a linear process. There are going to be hiccups, obstacles, great big tsunami waves in our way. And what we need to do is practice that agility to be able to reframe whenever we need to, which is why we do the if-then scenarios that I spoke about when I spoke about discipline. So coming back to our 3 items that I wanted to cover today, I just want to relate each of those habits very quickly to each of these 3 areas, just to close that loop for you. When we think about stress, when we can stand in acceptance and be in the moment, draw our mindset, our thought processes to be more present, we activate the chemistry of calm and we help to reduce that stress response. Become aware of your emotions and really practice self-management, the control of those emotions. Between experiencing an emotion and expressing it, there is a magical number called 90 seconds. We have 90 seconds between experiencing an emotion and expressing it. We can choose how we express it, but it takes discipline. Certainty, to be certain, we have to step into that role model mindset, because how we show up for others helps us to be more calm, compassionate, composed, ask more questions, listen out for a different perspective. Never be shy to understand that maybe somebody else might have a different way, that you might learn some wonderful new tricks along the journey. Seek guidance, and my most favorite competence or emotion or behavior, whatever you want to call it, is curiosity. Empowering self and others, that role model mindset is so important. Practice curiosity. Always remember to call people by their first name, especially when we're wanting to be in a compassionate, empathetic conversation with them. And don't just be interested in them from a work perspective. If you know that they were in a surf competition on the weekend, or that they surfed in a bright yellow surfboard, you might want to make a comment about that the next time you meet them. Seek guidance. always seek guidance. And as we give ourselves permission to not always get it right, so we give other people permission to not always get it right. It's hugely empowering for self and others. Finally, confidence. Connect to calm. Notice your emotions, which takes awareness. Be present, practice presence. One of the best ways to connect to calm is really through using the breath. When you feel frazzled, overwhelmed, stressed, or anxious, 3 or 4 long, deep breaths, where the out breath is twice the time or the distance as the in breath. So in for 4, out for 8, or in for 3 and out for 6. As we breathe out, so we are slowing down the parasympathetic nervous system. We are activating calm in the body and therefore in the mind. Confidence takes authenticity and vulnerability, because we need to understand what our strengths and our blind spots are. So we also need to practice looking out for and asking for guidance and seeking feedback. And finally, influence. We can't influence other people when we are frazzled, stressed, anxious, because we are not able to connect in a compassionate, empathetic way. We influence people when we are connected to that calm composure. Again, authenticity comes into play here, because we need to understand what our strengths are around building rapport, around creating opportunities for empowerment for them. These things all take practice and discipline. Charisma, that beautiful word, that wonderful ability to light up a room as you walk into it, to naturally draw people to you. Charisma is another of our emotional intelligence competencies. And then your communication skills. These all relate back to empathy. So, any thoughts around what the people in your system might need you to learn from this presentation today? Any thoughts around what the future you might need you to learn from what I've shared with you today? And, in 20 minutes, we can only cover so much. So each of these has got a lot more depth to it. So we can open up for the discussion now, Scotty. I think I'll stop sharing my slides. But that really, for me, are the 3, and they're everyday habits: discipline, empathy, and vulnerability. Really wonderful ways to overcome hardships and challenges. So love questions. Questions help me to grow. And if I don't know the answer, I will go on a little research mission, and I will be sure to get back in touch with you and let you know.
I love this. I love this.
What does that say?
What does the future you need to focus on today? Yeah, that's so good. What does the future you need to focus on today? If I showed you my screen, by the way, it's full of little pink Post-its right now from the notes I took. Rethink your challenges, reveal your potential. I mean, how good's that? What do they need you to learn today? Risk assessment. I mean, I just got Post-it notes everywhere here. Excellent presentation. Well done. So anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask?
Or insights? I'm happy to share. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah. So I've got one there, Alison, which is really around that whole caution, the procrastination thing, which many of us have had to deal with over the years in ourselves. Is I suppose I'm asking, can you spend too much time doing due diligence? Spending too much time, just being too cautious, so that you don't make decisions.
So I read a wonderful thing the other day, and it goes like this. I used to procrastinate, and then I became a pro. Okay. And isn't that just the truth? Because there's no half-hearted procrastination. There's just professional procrastination. And one of the things that I really encourage, especially when I deal with, when I'm working with graduates or with new leaders in business, is I say to them, just start. We don't know all the answers. We've got to take that first step.
Yeah.
Just start. And that's why I said to you, what one thing are you happy to work on from a discipline perspective this week? So maybe, Anthony, yours could be just to choose one thing every day that's going to move you closer to your goal. Your goal doesn't have to be crystal clear just yet. You've got an idea of what it is. But how are you going to build the clarity unless you start?
Yeah, you've only got to get you've only got to get to the main road. You don't have to know every step along the way to go to another city, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And also, don't forget, when you're sitting in that quandary, when you're sitting in that professional procrastination, think less of self and more of others.
Yeah.
Who is in your network that you could pick up a phone and just have a chat? Just get out of your head sometimes.
Yeah.
Getting out of your head sometimes is sometimes the best thing we can do.
Yeah.
So no more professional procrastinating. Clarity is never a one-off event. Clarity develops in the nooks and crannies and as we are going along the journey. Okay. Thanks
Anyone
for the
else?
question. Anyone else? Any other questions or insights? So, there's some things in the chat box. Let's have a look and see.
That was Anthony. He asked the same question, so he's already on top of that one. But Josh and Anne, which is pretty cool, right? They're both from Uganda, and I don't think they knew each other until now.
Wonderful.
As you said earlier when you first started, it's a small world, right? So, but I did have a question. What do you think is the, when we talk about procrastination and risk assessments, what's the general reason why you think people do it? Is it fear or lack of confidence or support? What do you think actually causes, what do you think some of the root cause of procrastination, but more importantly, what can we quickly do about it to snap into the, have a go attitude, that just get started attitude?
So I really think that fear stops us. Fear is one of the main reasons why we either do or don't do things, why we don't take that first step, why we don't show up, whatever it might be. And for me, now that I understand what I know about the brain and emotional intelligence and also neuroscience, I also know that we are born with two fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear we have learned. So when you are procrastinating, when you are stuck in status quo, the best thing to do is just notice that that's what you're doing, that you're stuck. Notice. And I really encourage you to notice the emotions that are going on for you in that moment. So it's not only about starting to notice what it is that I'm doing. Importantly, notice who are you being. So what emotions are showing up for me right now? Is that emotion anxiety? Okay, what am I anxious about? Being anxious, you're being anxious about something that hasn't yet happened. Okay, go and do some if-then scenario planning. I'm feeling nervous, or I'm feeling unsure, I'm feeling uncertain. Uncertainty, reach out, go and get the answers, go and ask somebody for help. Nervousness, okay, what can I practice? Where can I be disciplined? When we start to really identify and really bring that vulnerability, and I even say this in the boardrooms, I've said this in the boardroom with 9 bankers, me being the only woman in the room, we have to get naked with our emotions, which is be vulnerable. Just even if it's just with yourself, ask yourself more empowering questions. But so, Scotty and Anthony, you both brought up procrastination. Next time you feel yourself being distracted by strong emotions, by strong ways of being, procrastination, judgment, criticism, apathy, whatever it might be, notice, bring awareness to your emotional state right there and then, name it. We have to name it. It's just like the numbers in our business. We can't improve if we don't know the numbers in our business. As humans, we name our emotions in order to move on from them. So name it and understand, what is that one thing? I'm only asking you to do one thing to move forward, to move into a new mindset. And that would be my advice, Scotty.
Awesome. So we're getting close to time. So we'll just one more question. If not, we'll wrap up. So anyone else want to ask a question? No,
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a question. So Alison, how are you able to, observe these emotions long enough so that you can label them? Because it's kind of a tricky situation. It's actually a tricky situation. Sometimes they just keep on pulling you in and in and in, and then you find yourself, you've deep dived into these emotions that kind of even going really imaginative with these emotions. And then, so I just want to know, how am I able to, observe and be able to catch those so that I can move on forward?
Okay, beautiful question, Josh. I'm so glad you asked it. And it takes discipline. So that's what discipline is for. A lot of people, when they speak about emotional intelligence, they say self-awareness is the first habit. I say, well, we can't develop that awareness if we don't have the discipline first. And your most important tool for any of this work is one of these, is a pen and a piece of paper. So when you want to try and understand your emotions in that moment, just write. Just write, this is what I'm feeling. This is where I'm at. These are my emotions right now. You don't have to write War and Peace. I do 2 minutes. Set a timer for 2 minutes and write for 2 minutes. And you will start to see that it becomes easier and easier to identify our emotions. And when we spend a long time in a particular emotional state, just know it's a distraction. What you need to do is stop distracting yourself with that emotion and choose a more empowering one. So if any of you, I don't have his book, I normally have his book on my desk, but if any of you have read Brendan Burchard's High Performance Habits, it's my go-to guru Bible. I refer to it pretty much every day. And his question is, how can I bring more joy to this experience? Maybe that's not your word. Maybe your word might be, how can I bring more confidence, courage, discipline, whatever it is, and then spend some time writing. When we write, by old-fashioned, by hand, we create the neural pathway to the brain that activates that part of the brain that is responsible for our memories, for our long-term memories and creating new memories. And that gives us the ability to think and problem solve more expansively. Don't go anywhere. Just like you carry your ID book around with you, carry one of these with you. It's the most important tool in your kit box. I hope that helps, Joshua.
Yeah, great question, Joshua. Thanks heaps for that. Well, we'll wrap it up. That's been a great session. So many good points that you raised there, Alison. That was excellent. But I think just to wrap it up into 3 words: discipline, empathy, and vulnerability. So that was excellent. We will have the replay up, assuming everything goes well. Within a week, we do have more workshops coming up, which you can keep an eye on system 1357/live. And, we're going to obviously now schedule this time zone around this for not only for yourself, for anyone else in this time zone that it works, which is late Australia and early morning for where you are. And I think it's a good time zone for the UK. So we'll keep running with this for future events. So on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. Any one more final thing, Alison, for 30 seconds, just as a close?
Just as a close, remember that what resilient people do is not special. We are all resilient. Take that first step. Never be afraid of question, and never be afraid of reaching out to another person.
On that note, thank you very much, Alison. It's been a pleasure to have you here as a co-host. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Thanks so much, everyone. Really enjoyed
See
it.
everyone.